Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second lecture of our first semester play, Julius Caesar. So, in our first lecture, we talked about the definition of a drama, origin of a drama, and also we mentioned the functions of drama. And then we went a little bit through the theater definition also, and then the globe theater, in which, let's say, most of Shakespearean plays being performed there. And then we went through the definition of a tragedy. In this lecture, I will go through the publication history of our play, Julius Caesar, and then I will go to the historical context of the play and see the connection between the play and the historical period at that time. And then I will go also through a little bit introduction of our play and will finally introduce you to the main characters on our play Julius Caesar. So we might not probably be able to discuss the characters in details. However, we will go through them hopefully in our third lecture. So let's start with the publication history of our play Julius Caesar. So students, you have to keep this in mind. It was very hard, and it was not possible to date any of Shakespeare's plays with absolute certainty. So it was very hard to get the exact date of the written plays being performed at that time. But there was a critical, let's say, debate that Julius Caesar was written in 1599. There was a European traveler reporting in September 1599 a play about Julius Caesar in a theater on the far side of the Thames, and they believe that this play is Julius Caesar, and it was one of the first Shakespeare's play to be performed in the newly built Globe Theater. So they believe that Julius Caesar was one of the best plays at that time, and especially it was a tragedy. And then after performing a Julius Caesar, Hamlet after that, also long afterward being performed on the same stage. So Julius Caesar first appeared in a print in the first folio, 1623, and then the title was a little bit different with the title The Tragedy of Julius Caesar. Though in the table of contents it is listed as the life and the death of Julius Caesar, a little more suggestive of a history play. So, student, though there are a couple of dates being mentioned here for specific dates for the beginning, or let's say the time in which Julius Caesar was written, but there's also a kind of like a critical debate about the exact day being performed on stage. So this is all what has to do with the publication history of our play. So let's come to the historical context of our play and have a little bit discussion about it. So what is the historical context of our play Julius Caesar? In 1599, Queen Elizabeth was 66 years old, and she was still unmarried and still childless. And you know that the student at that time, it was a monarchy, it was not a republic, which means that the successor comes from Elizabethan hereditary. So there were a couple of concerns about the safety of England's future. However, it had been the subject of the so-called succession crisis. So, student, if you pay attention to this part, succession crisis, this is exactly what's gonna happen in our play Julius Caesar. It's all about the succession. It's all about those who will rule after Caesar. So, since she came to the throne in 1559 at the young age of 26, because of the uncertainty and the conflict surrounding the succession of her father, King Henry VIII. So, student, she was 6 years old, and she was unmarried and childless. Everybody is worried what will happen to England if Queen Elizabeth dies. Okay, so that what happened at that time, succession crisis. So we have that here. Unlike Henry, Elizabeth did not allow parliamentary debate on the subject of her successor, a fact that not all members of parliament accepted it quietly. So, a couple of parliament members were very worried about the successor thing, and she actually didn't allow such debate to happen. So, she was forcing her power and let everyone um, quiet and not talking about the succession part. However, some members of parliament accepted that quietly and they were very worried about the succession part. So, what happened in 1517? Uh, Parliament pressed the queen, forced the queen to name her successor, but Queen Elizabeth, she refused to name that. So during the subsequent decades, tracts on the Elizabethan succession came pouring in from England, Scotland, and the continent, most contributed by Catholics. So there is starting kind of like, let's say, a rebellion things that started to happen against Elizabeth herself, the queen, and she knew about that, and she was actually worried about the parliament thing because, as we have, as we can see here, in 1581, Parliament passed the acts against seditious words and rumors uttered against the Queen's most excellent majesty. So, what's happening now, a lot of, let's say, seditious acts and words and rumors about the succession thing, and all of these things are happening against the queens. And there were a couple of publications of seditious books, and it was also considered to be as a felony. So, student, if you understand all of these things, is that people started to turn against Queen Elizabeth, and this is what we can call it. 2 seconds ago, we called that as a succession crisis. So that's what happened at that time. People started to do a couple of seditious books, and all of these things, the parliament tried to suppress such a things and consider these things as a felony or as a crime. So, why the historical context is very important? What's the historical context? I would say how the historical context is connected to our play Julius Caesar. We can see here what has this to do with our play Julius Caesar about the collapse of the Roman Republic. So, student, you have to distinguish between a monarchy and between a republic. A republic in which the citizens can choose their leader, while the monarchy, citizens has nothing to do with it. Rather, it will be happening by hereditary. So, uh, the answer to the question here is that there is little argument for reading Julius Caesar as intimately connected to the succession crisis, particularly compared to something like Norton and Shakespeare's own Richard II. So, how can we understand that Julius Caesar is related to what's happening during Elizabethan period? So the two main points to take away from the suppressed controversy surrounding Elizabeth's reign and succession. First, the tensions between the English Parliament and the English monarchy, particularly concerning the future of the realm, were already fraught. So, do you see here, student? Do you see the connection between our play and the history at that time? So there was a tensions between English Parliament and the English monarchy. So this actually gonna happen in our play. It was gonna be a tension between the characters regarding the monarchy and the republic part. So this is exactly the first reason. And the second reason is that the specter of active conspiracies that might threaten the life of the ruler was very real and very frightening. So at that time, during Elizabethan time, there were a couple of conspiracies uh, against the leaders, such as Henry and any other leaders at that time. We will come to that later. However, these conspiracies were very real and frightening. And this is what can happen in our play Julius Caesar, and we will see that there is a conspiracy against Caesar, and the people who are surrounding him will do this conspiracy. We see here that King Henry of France, he was a close ally of Elizabeth. He was the subject of two unsuccessful attempts on his life in 1593 and in 1594 before one succeeded in 1610. So what's happening here, student, is that King Henry at that time went through two assassination or two attempts of assassination, or two conspiracies. One of them, two were unsuccessful, unfortunately, but the last one succeeded in 1610. So we have here that perhaps the best known conspiracy active at the time of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar is the Essex rebellion. So, student, in 1599, try to pay attention to this. In 1599, Robert Devereux, the second Earl of Essex and a great favorite of the Queen, was appointed Lord Lieutenant of Ireland and sent to a series of revolts. So the campaign was actually a disaster, and Devereux ultimately made a truce with the rebels, and he returned to England with disgrace, and he was feeling very ashamed, and he was deprived from his position in June 16. So, and he was also denied many of the favors he had previously enjoyed. So Devereux, he was a very close to the Queen Elizabeth. However, after he fell and he made a couple of truces with the rebels, he was denied from many favors and he was deprived from his position. So the place in which he lives, it is called Devereux's London, and that residence became a meeting spot for anyone who is discontent with the Elizabeth's government. So everyone who hates the Queen Elizabeth and everyone who doesn't want the Queen Elizabeth to be on the throne, so he becomes, or let's say he goes to Devereux's residence. So the people who oppose the Queen Elizabeth and the people who want to rebel against the Queen Elizabeth, principally to the highest degree, objected actually the control of Sir Robert Cecil. Sir Robert Cecil, who is that? He is the chief advisor of Queen Elizabeth. And legendarily, the conspirators requested that some version of Richard II, perhaps not definitely Shakespeare's, to be performed in a preparation for their action. So the rebellion itself was unsuccessful. And do you see this, student? What's happening here is that the people who stand against the Queen Elizabeth started to do something or wanted to motivate people against Elizabeth. So what they did, according to the legend, is that requested that some kind of like a version of play Richard II, or kind of like anything to be presented in front of them just to make people aware of their action or the things they actually would love to do against the Queen Elizabeth. So Cecil, the one who is, as we have said, Cecil is the chief advisor of the Queen Elizabeth, denounced Essex as a traitor, and Essex was executed for his actions in February 1601. So when the play Julius Caesar was performed in 1599, the conspirators, what I mean by the conspirators here is the conspirators against the Queen Elizabeth. There was a great concern or a serious concern to the government and a symbol of hope to many discontent subjects. So when people, or let's say the audience at that time, when they watched Julius Caesar and the events that happened in Julius Caesar and how people rebel against Julius Caesar, that kind of like spread kind of like, let's say, a hope for many of them who hated Queen Elizabeth. So the figure of Caesar in the play is similar to that of Richard II, was frequently used in debates about tyranny, and as Daniel said in Arden introduction, even elementary knowledge of Queen Elizabeth's policies in the years up to her death allows parallels between herself and a tyrannical Caesar. So there is a connection between Queen Elizabeth and Julius Caesar, our play. The connection is that Queen Elizabeth is a monarchy and Caesar. We will go through this discussion later because it's very important to know a little bit about the history of our play Julius Caesar. So there is a great connection between Queen Elizabeth and Julius Caesar, and we will discuss that later once we start with our play Julius Caesar. So the play's timing therefore invites a connection between one nascent conspiracy and another. So do you see this, student? This is very important. There is a huge connection between the two things, which is the time of Queen Elizabeth and our play Julius Caesar. Another important thing at that time is that the debate, or let's say the struggles between the Protestant and Catholic theology. So, both of them disagreed on many points, but one of the particular significance was the existence, or let's say, the things that are related to God. So, even Shakespeare himself, when writing about Julius Caesar, he wrote about a couple of signs, a couple of ghosts. Even in Hamlet, the figure of ghost was there and can only be from heaven or from hell. So, all of these things, the things that are related to ghosts, and a lot of signs, wonders, prophetic dreams, and superstitious practices, all of these was compatible with or even contingent upon the Christian religion, was a popular subject of discussion. So when we discuss our play Julius Caesar, we will come through the Christian religion and how is it connected to God and what are the superstitious practices being there in our play, and what's happening to the, let's say, Caesar when it comes as it goes to Prudis, and we will discuss that later. So the Bible revealed that God often sent let's come through this a little bit. So, God often sends portents or visions to his followers, but equally demonstrated that the devil could mimic such signs. So, there is kind of like debate regarding being a Catholic or regarding being a Protestant. So, even there is a debate about the Christian religious at all. So, Julius Caesar's mix of theology, ancient Roman and Elizabethan Christian, with both Protestants and Catholic elements, provides a particularly confusing backdrops for analysis of these supernatural elements. So, when reading Julius Caesar, we will see there are a couple of supernatural elements that's happening in the play. So, we can link all of these signs, supernatural things, we can link it to the Christian, Protestant, and Catholic elements being written in our play. So, this is, let's say, all about the historical context of a play, as we have already mentioned, that is very important. And Elizabeth's time is really connected to our play Julius Caesar, and when we come to the play, we will discuss it more. So let's come here to the introduction part of our play and have a little bit discussion about it. So scholars generally agree that Julius Caesar was first written and performed in 1599 and might have been the first of Shakespeare's plays to be performed in Globe Theatre. So one of the most important aspects of the play is that Shakespeare's audiences could relate to included civil wars, which they were forced to endure, and the wide gap between the powerful, wealthy, aristocratic and working class people. So, a student, this is very important, especially the civil wars that's happening, or let's say will happen in a play. So, instead of we will not actually go through it now, however, I will just explain a little bit of it. So, civil wars are happening at that time during our play Julius Caesar. When Caesar get assassinated by his closer friends, civil war emerged among people. So we also can connect it uh, to our real time, or to our things that's happening in Iraq as well. And we will go through this also later when we go in details with the play. So also from the beginning of the play, we know that there is a class discrimination or class distinction between the wealthy and the poor working class. So there is a class distinction, or let's say class discrimination between the two people, and we will see it very clearly by the beginning of our play. So Shakespeare's audiences were well experienced with the material that made up this tragic drama. So they were very experienced with that because they actually, the audience at that time, also having a civil war among themselves, and also hated Queen Elizabeth as the other characters in our play hated Julius Caesar. So even the stories of English history that they studied in school were colored by the conquest of the plays titled Military Genius. So this is a very important student. In writing Julius Caesar, Shakespeare chiefly drew on the events in the life of the historical figures. So we have a couple of characters in our play, and one of the characters is a Brutus, and Julius Caesar drew on the events in the lives of the historical figures. So Brutus was one of the historical figures, okay? And he took a little bit information about him from the biographies written by Plutarch. And these biographies called Parallel Lives, translated by Thomas North as the lives of the noble and the Romans in 1579. So who was Plutarch? Plutarch was a Greek historian, and he worked to record the historical tradition, moral views, and the ethical judgments of ancient Greek and Roman cultures. So, according to some academic studies, Shakespeare was not only specially interested in the details of history addressed by Plutarch, rather, so he focused on the underlying characters' strengths and weaknesses as well as motives that Plutarch noted in many of the great ancient leaders. So, what does that mean, student? It means that when talking about those historical figures such as Brutus and any other people, Shakespeare actually didn't, or let's say he was not actually interested in their history, rather, he was more interested about the character, their characters, let's say their characteristics, such as the strength, the weaknesses, as well as the way they think, the way they move. Okay, all of these things drove the attention of Shakespeare, and they took all of these Shakespeare took all of this information from Plutarch. While the action of Julius Caesar closely follows the events described by Plutarch, Shakespeare greatly modified the significance of those events. So there were a couple of real events being written by Plutarch, and those events are, let's say, related to history. But when writing Julius Caesar, Shakespeare modified, like he changed a little bit of these events. Okay, he changed, or let's say, modified the significance of those events. So in our play Julius Caesar, there are two characters, Brutus and Caesar. And after Caesar was assassinated, Brutus became, let's say, a little bit the leader, or let's say someone who was supposed to be his best friend. So the role of Brutus is very great in the play, and the role of Caesar is also there and evident. So there was kind of like a debate regarding whether the protagonist, let's say the hero of the play, is Caesar himself or Brutus. So yeah, so as you can see here, which one of them qualifies a tragic hero. So we will have a discussion about this also later when we come to our play. We have another character in the play, his name is Cassius, and he assassinates Caesar because he was very envy from Caesar, and we will also come to that later in our play. So let's come to the final thing in the introduction part, is that critics generally agree that the uncertainties surrounding the protagonist and the political issues raised by the drama are intentional. So all of these things that's happening in the play were written intentional, just to probably try to motivate people to stand against probably Elizabethan time, or Elizabeth, the Queen Elizabeth. So that might be probably the reason. Or let's see that the ambiguities in Julius Caesar, they maintain, serve to intensify Shakespeare's depiction of the limitation of a human understanding and the difficulty of defining absolute truth in regard to individual and historical events. So there is a lot of discussion about the play. The play can be related to history, which is Elizabethan time or Elizabethan period, and it is also related to Christian and Protestant belief, or let's say theology. And the play itself also is related to the republic time or monarchy time. So all of these things are very important, and we will come to discuss all of them in details, hopefully with the next lecture. So we have the main characters in our play. We have Julius Caesar, as we have explained that he's a Roman general, and some critics think that Caesar is the hero, the tragic hero of our play, and some of them argues that he's not. So he's a Roman general, and he was assassinated by his close friend Prudis, Cassius, and other people. So the character of Caesar is the most difficult to interpret because he only appears a few times at the beginning of the play, and then he was assassinated later. And we will not hear from him again, rather, we will see only his ghost in the play. So, if Caesar is viewed as someone who is ambitious, or someone who's vain, and someone who's a tyrant, then why do the other, as supposed to be the other friends or other people, try to assassinate him, such as Cassius and Prudis? So some of them believe that Julius Caesar was a tyrant, and some of them believe that he was actually a really wise leader. And we will come to that later when we will discuss why his friend assassinated him. Where is the reason behind that? So this is Julius Caesar. We have another character, and his name Mark Antony. And his name actually in Latin is Marcus Antonius, and he is a Roman general, and he is a very loyal friend to Julius Caesar. So we have Antony, he's a very loyal friend of Julius Caesar, and we will come to this character also later, and we will see how he is such a loyal friend to Julius, and what did he do after after Caesar was assassinated. We have another character. His name is Artemetris, and he's a teacher of rhetoric. And we know that rhetoric is the art of speaking or art of affecting people through using rhetorical skills. And we will come also to that later. And we see that Artemetris tried to warn Julius Caesar of the conspiracy, but unfortunately, Julius Caesar didn't notice him. We have another character, and he is, as some of the critics said, that he is the hero of the play, and some of them believe that Julius Caesar is the hero of our play. So, Marcus Brutus is a Roman senator, and he joins the conspiracy because he fears that Caesar's ambition will turn against him, and he will turn to a tyrant. And we will come to Brutus, and we will see how he was actually how he killed Caesar and deceived him with the other conspirators. We have Octavius, and Julius. He is a Julius Caesar's adopted son and heir. And unfortunately, Octavius was not in Rome when Caesar was assassinated. We have Calpurnia, and we have two female characters in the play. One of them is Calpurnia, and she is Caesar's wife, and she actually had a nightmare before Caesar's death the next day, and unfortunately Caesar didn't believe her, and we will come to her character later. We have Casca, is a member of Caesar's let's say troop, and Casca also joined the conspirators, and he was one of the conspirators to kill Caesar. We have Cassius. He is uh, the general and Roman politician, and he was the head of the conspiracy part. Like he was the leader. He was the one who convinced the other conspirators to kill Caesar. So this name is very important. Some of the people pronounce his name as Cassius. Sometimes I think it's a Russian name, so it can be pronounced in a different way, which is Cassius with this part. So Cassius or Cassius, it is the same, and it is the same character, and uh, he was the one who conspired against Caesar and killed him. We have Cicero, and he's a member of the Roman Senate, and he is an orator and considered to be a nobleman, and his role is a little bit important in the play. We have Cinna, he's a tribune and a conspirator as well, and he's the one who convinced Cassius to recruit Prudis against to stand with him, or let's say with them, to kill Caesar. We have a Flavius, and he was also a Roman tribune, and he also wanted to. We will come to his character in the play as well. We have Lepidus, and he's a Roman politician, and he is one of the good people who joined Antony and Octavius to, let's say, rule the Roman Empire after Caesar's assassination. We have Marlus as well, and we have Panzerus, and he's a servant of Cassius. The role of those people are very less important than the main character. We have Portia. Her role is very important. So we have two main female characters in the play. We have Calpurnia and we have Portia. So Calpurnia is Caesar's wife, and Portia is Brutus' wife. And she knew that something happened with the Brutus, and she knew that Brutus will do something wrong, and unfortunately she couldn't know that till the last minute. So here is the list of our characters uh, for our play, and we will also hopefully for the next lecture we will go through act 1 in our play, and we will go through a deep discussion about how each character what is the language being used at that time. So I hope this is a clear, student, and I hope you understand that. So if you do have any question, and we will have a discussion later regarding this information. So have a good day, and thank you for listening.